Hello, I'm Neises. I'm the Director of PennPraxis, and I teach at Penn in the Planning and Design School. And I'm going to show you some things that graduate students have been doing with Thrive to look at the community benefits agreements. This group of students has looked at a number of different case studies, these and others, trying to look at them in detail and understand how they work. And this information is available through Thrive. What communities typically push for are these categories of things: environmental improvements or impact reduction of the new development, all kinds of jobs and workforce development initiatives, community investment of many kinds, and staying power, counter-displacement investments, as well as very specific measures for increasing transparency and accountability. Some of the benefits agreements we looked at are much better at some of these dimensions than others, because coalitions of community organizations decide that the thing they care about is, in the case of Bayview Hunters Point, workforce development and staying power are the main things. So their community benefits agreement really focuses on those, whereas others are looking for other benefits. I think what we really learned from this whole process is that a strong CBA will make both the city and the developer accountable in a binding, enforceable legal contract. In this case, the city and the state governments bear the most responsibility for all of these many years of refining and also for the cleanup. And they are much more responsible for the greater good and the long-term future than Hilco is. The largest dollar values and widest scope are possible when the community is harmed by a new development, when there are clear negative impacts. But in this case, the current property owner is not the original polluter. So it really means that the city becomes a key player in this CBA that you're negotiating. I think we also learned from looking at a lot of these community benefits agreements and talking to many people that Philadelphia doesn't usually get great CBAs from developers, at least so far. That's partly because construction costs are high, but rents are much lower here than in some other cities. As just a recent example, the Schuylkill Yards CBA produced only a $2 million community benefit, but the Powelton Village neighborhood and others were able to negotiate and win a zoning overlay that limits the kinds and size and appearance of new houses and apartment buildings that will come in. I think that the point at which the coalition of community organizations will have the most power to get a good CBA is when rezoning of the refinery site is under consideration by the city. Nothing can really be built there without approval to rezone. So that's the time when there's really an opportunity. I think we found through our discussions with many different people who have been looking at that site and trying to understand it and do charrettes and think about what's going to happen there is it's good to think about the fact that Hilco's focus is almost certainly on increasing the value of this property in the heart of the city, not on operating a giant distribution hub for forever. So that probably means that focusing on the big picture in the CBA process and not just those 5 categories that I mentioned may be really important. So as you're thinking about that big picture, land use set possibilities and development frameworks, what can really benefit the community? Where are there some win-win ideas for improving Hilco's approach to value creation? How can you start a broad public conversation about rezoning and about the city's development policies? And what are the ways to shift the city's aspirations for this site? This is a project that 2 students have been working on to think specifically just about the component that is staying power or counter-gentrification measures that could be part of the CBA. This is really a kind of critical moment for South Philadelphia because so much of the city's total land that's zoned for industry is in South Philly. The refinery in its open and polluting state and the industrial zoning shown here in yellow has really kept the growth in home values lower in Grays Ferry and other communities next to the refinery than in adjacent Philadelphia neighborhoods, at least until now. But we can assume that this process has already started to change the moment that the refinery was announced that it would be closed and a new owner took over. You see this everywhere in Grays Ferry and other parts of South Philadelphia, where the longstanding houses are being torn down and dwarfed by the new development. There are signs everywhere asking, saying that people will buy houses in whatever condition. And this quote from Carol Foy really allows you to kind of see that the value proposition is not a good one. This is looking at current home prices on one block in Grays Ferry. These new houses are worth so much more, but there's still a lot of vacant land, and an opportunity to think about that land differently. As you all know, these are just a few houses on this block, quotes from people who live in them. But as you know, there's just so many social ties in most South Philly neighborhoods that are still intact. So many people who have been here for a long time, and there's too much to lose. But this is happening everywhere in Philadelphia. So how are these neighborhoods that are around the refinery different from what we see happening elsewhere? I think you can really make a case, our graduate students certainly thought so, that this is different because the refinery has been this huge polluter and these communities have tolerated those impacts for so long. Those residents should be around to enjoy the benefits of its closure. You've already been building power and changing this conversation for a good while now. So thinking about how that effort to build power can be ramped up as part of this process is the next step. So what can you do in a community where there are 50% owners and 50% renters? In Philadelphia, there are some protections for owners, and there are some efforts to increase the number of people who own their own homes, especially long-term residents, but there's not a lot of money in those programs. And so there can be a significant amount of investment to increase the capacity of those programs to really serve a lot of people in South Philadelphia. There are not many protections at all for renters. And so you can look at what a number of other cities, Anacostia and Washington, D.C., and several others have done to bring programs and policies to bear to help renters so that they are not displaced. You can use land use zoning to increase staying power. Specifically thinking about how to hold on to the industrial zoning and how to engage in the kinds of changes that developers want to create opportunities for investment in protections for affordable homes and retail. You can think about proactive zoning, ways to shape the future of the refinery with environmental overlays that not only provide for the cleanup of the site as it currently is, but if there is a major distribution hub that comes in, how do you think about things like electricity at loading dock bays to eliminate idling and ways to reduce the emissions by having new truck fleets and things like that. You can also use proactive zoning. I mentioned that Powelton Village has a conservation overlay as part of its recent CBA that says, we can't tear down buildings here. We have to think about the kinds of new buildings that go up. And you can also use transfers of development rights to push the allowable development to places where it really fits better, and just have an exchange of money so that takes a lot of the pressure off of the long-term community. Communities like Grays Ferry, which is mapped here in detail, and you can do the same thing for every part of South Philadelphia, really need to push the city to move quickly to hold on to vacant land. There's so much land here that's vacant, buildings that are vacant. A lot of it's privately owned, as you see in red, but there's also so much that is city owned, that's being held by PHS, that's being held by the Philadelphia Redevelopment Authority, that's in land banks. And that land is all available for community land trusts or other moves to increase affordability, or to generate revenue for those programs for renters and owners, or renters who want to become owners. You can convert these vacant lots into investment in staying power. You can think about renovating existing buildings to increase affordability. These are two buildings on 25th Street that could become affordable multi-generational living that also has healthcare or daycare or job training integrated into them. And in general, what we were really thinking about, and would love to talk to you more about with more of the students' slides, is what is a kind of timeline for action here. So the students who have been working on this project were really emphasizing that now is the time for community land trusts through the CBA, for property tax freezes, for renter protections, and for home buyer owner support. If you do that now, along with some of these other early efforts on other dimensions, then you can start thinking about other bigger moves that will have a big positive effect on property values. But it's better to think about those happening later once protection is in place, so that the residents who are here now can stay. Thanks.
And again, I want to thank you for listening. I want you all to come out and be a part of our coalition, because it's very important that we learn how to work together. You see the stress and strife we're having in the community in our city now. So let us be an example how we can work together, black, white, whatever color we are. Let us all come together. I want to thank y'all. If you need if you need any information, you can always go to our website. And I want to thank you, and do have a good night.